Welcome to Garden Grounds. I will be with you in 30 seconds. All right, welcome to Garden Grounds. Today we're going to talk about neem oil. That'll be the light subject. And go ahead and just ask any question you have with respect to vegetable gardening. I will answer them as best I can. Now, I do this every second and fourth Thursday, 11 a.m. And it's a public live Q&A. So make sure you put the word question in front of your question, or I'm not going to be able to pull it out of the chat. But I will try and answer as many as I can in about 45 minutes. Certainly, if you want to use a super chat and have a question, I will answer that with priority. You're also going to see people with stars next to their name. They're perk members. I'll talk about that shortly. And when I see their question, I do answer them first as part of the perk memberships. But go ahead and throw out your questions. We will get to the neem oil discussion shortly. Girl foliage. What type of bugs makes hundreds of tiny holes in the leaves of tomato plants this time of year during midsummer heat? How to prevent them next time? Well, there's probably more than one. My best guess would be the flea beetle. Flea beetles are tiny little black specks. They almost look like a coarse ground pepper. They really like eggplant. Eggplant and tomatoes are in the same family. So when you see tons of pin-sized holes, it's usually flea beetles. They can be managed with insect dust. I found that spinosad helped a little bit. I use a stronger chemical called 7. That's not organic. People also say diatomaceous earth sprinkled on the leaves can work. That's not a chemical. That's finely ground silica, so it is organic. But ultimately, you need some sort of insect dust on there to manage the flea beetles, assuming that it's flea beetles. How do you prevent them next time? Flea beetles are kind of standards in most gardens, and it's probably really about just doing a treatment regularly. I have found that they don't bother my tomatoes as much, but every year there's infestations on my eggplant. Eaglet. As a new gardener, how does one emotionally deal with all the setbacks in the garden? It's discouraging to start from seed indoors in February, only to watch the eggplant not fruit. Very good question. Going to be doing some videos on burnout. I get burned out really July 15th, to the first week of August. My energy is actually coming back. Part of what I learned to do is focus on your successes. I've been doing this for decades. You're just getting started. Every time something doesn't work, you're going to learn something. I would also probably say you do have some successes in there. And I would keep a journal. Write down what happens to the eggplant. It's, just reading the question, that there's no fruit yet for the eggplant. Eventually they'll get there. If the plants look weak or they're not really growing well, go ahead and hit your eggplant with some water-soluble fertilizer like fish emulsion or AgroThrive. That's an organic fertilizer I recommend. You can find them in my video description. In actually any video that I do, in the video description, you can find the products I'm affiliated with. AgroThrive is one of them. Give them a little bit of nitrogen. Sometimes it takes a while for the heat to kick in and help your eggplant, but they're going to get going. But I do recommend taking time to look at the bed you created, look at the plants you're growing, because you guys are really sculptors and you're taking seeds, as your medium and the earth as your medium, and you're creating something amazing. I mean, just think about a few seeds held in your hand that create an entire garden, can create, literally thousands of pounds of food. So focus on that too, and just realize you're not supposed to know everything all at once. I can go over the failures in my garden, but I tend to look at the successes and just slow and steady, give yourself credit for what you accomplished and, see what's happening in your garden. Like the other day, I was walking through, the garden looks pretty good. I had to throw out some, it'll come to me, Brussels sprouts, because the whiteflies have just been pounding them, and I've been hitting them with sprays, organic sprays, and they're just coated in organic sprays. I tried something stronger, not organic. That didn't work. The whiteflies are just there, and finally I just yanked the plants out, took them over, and threw them into the compost bin. I gave it a try. It's not working. Every year the whiteflies kick the butts of my brassicas, collards, cabbages, kales. So I am still adapting a way to deal with them. But I have beautiful cucumbers, tomatoes. The beets are doing really well. So really kind of focus on the successes. Let me go back to where the questions are. So you do make sure, you guys, if you're new, put question in front of the question, but I see one here. My cucumbers stopped flowering. Why? Cucumbers do get beat up in the heat. If you have heat that's staying in the upper 90s, sometimes they stop flowering. If diseases come in and slow them down, they stop flowering, but they really get beat up by heat. The best thing to do, put some new cucumber seeds in the ground now. Let them get growing. As those plants die out, you'll have brand new cucumber plants that will produce later in August and into September. Zoso, how do you keep stink bug type insects off tomatoes? You don't, besides hand picking. I don't typically find them on tomatoes, but I was just doing a garden ramblings for this week, and I found them on the underside of a tomato leaf. That's because my squash got killed off. All the squash bugs had to go somewhere, so they moved over to some tomato plants. So you regularly have to go out in your garden a couple times a week, look on the undersides of the leaves of your squash and zucchini plants, find the eggs, remove them. Tomatoes are a little bit tougher because there's so many leaves, but you can't really do much except, look for them and remove them. Can you use neem oil on eggplant? You can. Anytime that you try a new spray, be it coming from me, hopefully you trust me, thank you, something you read online, if you've been using a spray solely on squash plants and it's really effective and you decide to use it on eggplant, always test spray. So any new spray that you use, or any new spray you're using, or any old spray that you're using on a new plant, test spray. Spray the leaves, wait 24 to 48 hours, see if there's any damage. It's just good practice. But you could use neem oil on eggplant. It may or may not help with the beetles. If we're talking about the flea beetles, I find that neem oil works really well for chewing caterpillars, worms, like, the green cabbage looper, any kind of worm that chews and swallows. Sometimes it's not the best on beetles. Question, how do I prevent splitting while my watermelon is growing? So that's really tough. Watermelons split because it's really dry. Then you get a heavy rain. They pull in the water too quickly. They crack. It can come from you not over watering. You really watermelons need a lot of water, but you want to do more slow and steady watering than a whole big drenching at once. And usually if it's been dry and then you water, they can crack. The only really thing that you can do is to buy crack resistant varieties, or try and regulate the watering you're doing, but that doesn't prevent a huge rainfall from coming and then the fruit end up cracking. It's not anything that you're doing wrong. Nina, who is a perk member. So this format is my live Q&A. Every second Thursday, fourth Thursday at 11 a.m. I do this. Public, anybody can sign on. You have to just subscribe and follow me and I'll answer your questions. If you like this format, I also have perk memberships where I do this 4 or 5 times a month. The group is much smaller, 20, 30 people. Stay on for about an hour and I will answer all your questions. The group is really good too. They're going to give you support. You find people in your own zone or your own area. It's a really, really helpful group. Question, let's see. Hold on. All right. So a lot of people are coming through. If I miss your question and you see that I missed it, please repost it again. Question, should I deadhead my sunflowers? No, I don't think so. They're really geared to grow and flower and produce as long as they can. Removing them isn't going to necessarily create more flowers. Robert, there are many videos promoting the use of yeast, flour, and baking soda to increase growth yields. Do they really work? So let's just go over real quick. Baking soda in your soil is a toxin. You do not want to put baking soda in the soil. There's a lot of literally stupid videos that are created by a computer voice that says, here's a benefit of baking soda, and they actually show tablespoons going in around tomato plants. Baking soda makes a great antifungal. Do not use it as a fertilizer in your soil. You're going to be disappointed. Baking soda, 1 or 2 tablespoons in a gallon of water. You mix it through. You spray the leaves of your plants. Changes the pH. Great as an antifungal. And it's effective and it can work. It washes off with rain real easily, but if you keep it on, it makes a difference. That's not enough baking soda to drip into the soil and cause a problem. Just don't pour a gallon of baking soda mixed in water, or a tablespoon of baking soda mixed in a gallon of water around your plant. That doesn't help. Flour is nothing more than an organic something to break down. So if you're using that in your soil, it's not going to do anything. Some people may use it on the leaves to impact ants or insects. It might have a value for that. Yeast is, I don't see the benefit that it would have to really go through it unless you have time and you want to do it. It's not so bad sometimes to mix up some yeast and put it on your compost bed, but that's just an addition that really, it doesn't matter. There's so many bacterias and natural yeast that are already in your soil, that are in your compost bin, that I don't find a value for that. So I'm not, it's, if you have the time and you want to test something out, I recommend always test, see what it does. And learn, but it's just not going to do anything spectacular that it's needed. B, some of my tomatoes have brown spots on the bottom of it. Why is this happening, and what can I do to avoid this? Thank you. That's blossom end rot. I have a video on my channel. If you want to go there now, it says blossom end rot, and it really shows pepper plants. Same thing happens to tomato plants. So when your plant root system can't access calcium in the soil, it's a problem. So what happens is the plant starts taking the calcium from the lower portion of the plant, usually where the tomatoes are, and then those tomatoes start suffering and they get a black or brown bottom. It's called blossom end rot, and the plant sends the nutrients to the top. This happens most often in containers, where the tomato plants get big, we get busy, we don't water right away, the root system dries out, it's damaged, it can't pull in nutrients. It can also be from not having calcium in your soil, which is rare, but you can always, mix a little bit of lime in some water, pour it into the container, or put some lime down around your ground planted plants, hose it in. That will ensure that the calcium is there. But a lot of times it comes from just not steady watering. Once you go back to watering more regularly, you don't let the container plants dry out, the blossom end rot tends to go away. And just FYI, the Roma tomatoes and San Marzano types, for some reason, at least in Maryland, seem to be more susceptible to blossom end rot. Douglas, how can I stop black spots on my grapes? So it is a fungus, and the only way to really stop them is to spray. So you can use any kind of spray. You usually have to spray earlier in the year. I was getting black spots on the grapes and on my leaves, and I would spray copper fungicide. Any copper-based spray works. It's organic. You can also use Daconil, which is not organic, but it's effective. You want to read the instructions on anything you're using. Just because it's organic doesn't mean you should be ingesting it. And just because it's a chemical that's not deemed organic doesn't mean it's going to kill you. But what's most important is to be picking the fungicide that you're going to use to manage the black spot on your grapes, and just start spraying regularly. And right now I would kind of take note of when they showed up. Certainly spray now, but next year try and spray a little bit earlier. Joni, flea beetles can be washed off with water, but they do hop really high and they just come back with very quickly. Certain insects like aphids, if you wash them off higher up on a plant, They fall to the ground. They don't make it back up there, but flea beetles can. So, tips for dealing with cabbage moths. The white cabbage moth that flies around psychotically is technically a butterfly. I've been corrected. I can't stop them. I used to run around like a madman, and I had tennis rackets throughout the garden. And if I saw them, I would be, swatting in the air, chasing these white butterflies, which looks crazy to neighbors because they don't know what you're doing. Anyway, even if I stayed up on it, I didn't kill enough to make a difference. So I use ag fabric around different brassicas where they lay their eggs, and that's made my life easier. I also use neem oil. So let's talk about neem oil real quick. There's really two kinds of neem oil, garbage and cold pressed neem oil. So the first thing that I want to impress is that if you are wanting to use neem oil, it's very effective for chewing insects. You want cold pressed neem oil, 100% cold press. I sell that at my seed and garden shop. A little bit goes a long way. Wherever you buy it, and I'm going to say it again, 100% cold pressed neem oil. Because if you go to the stores and you see neem oil and you see neem spray and you look in the bottom left corner, it's going to say hydrophobic extract of neem. Let me write that down and show it to you. It's going to say hydrophobic extract of neem. And what they do is they take out all the good stuff. Hydrophobic extract. So if you see hydrophobic extract as the type of neem oil it is, they took out all the good stuff. The chemical compound in neem oil is azadirachtin. Azadirachtin is what the insect ingests. It shuts down their stomach. It messes up other things. If you spray eggs, it messes up, how they kind of form. And that's what kills the targeted insect. Once you get a hydrophobic extract, they take out all the good stuff and they're just calling it neem oil. And neem oil, like any oil is a fungicide and a miticide, meaning soft-bodied insects, when they're coated with oil, suffocate and die. So you're buying something and it says neem, but it's not 100% cold pressed neem oil, which I highly recommend. And again, if you see hydrophobic extract, you have the garbage. And it's okay if you want to use it for, soft-bodied insects, but most of us want the neem that's going to kill the chewing insects. How I use it, I take 1 or 2 tablespoons of neem oil into a gallon of water, and then I use 1 tablespoon of Castile type soaps. You need to put soap in there because oil floats. If you don't want to add in soap, the oil stays on top and you're just spraying water till you get down to the oil, and then you end up with damage to your plants because you're spraying oil on there. So a tablespoon of Castile soap, that's safe, pure soap. If you're using like dish detergents, anything stronger, start with a teaspoon, maybe 2 teaspoons. Mix up your neem oil. Watch to see if it comes to the top right away. And then and if it doesn't, that means it's getting dispersed through the water. So you're gonna, shake that between every spray. So you shake it real vigorously, spray your tomato plant, go to the next one, shake it again, and that ensures that you get the neem oil dispersed through the oil. You want to use that when you see problems, but you also want to probably use it every 10 to 14 days to keep the chewing insects under control. All right, Julie, who is a perk member. Do I prefer 7 spray or dust? I'm still battling the Japanese beetles. So I'm 95% organic. I will never be 100% anything. It's just, in my opinion, not healthy. But I know what goes into my garden. So sometimes I use 7 dust for cucumber beetles, or on an outer leaf. For flea beetles on my eggplant. Or for the cucumber beetle, I'll dust the outer leaves of my cucumber plants away from the flowers. It depends on what's going on. I have a crazy outbreak of lanternflies. I mean, I had thousands of nymphs on my muscadines, on my grapes. So I did use the spray to contact the leaves of the muscadines and grapes, and it's really, really effective. I'm also using that spray on the trunks of the tree of heaven to kill more of them. But, for Japanese beetles, if it's something I'm not really eating, I'll use the spray, or I'm not going to be eating for, weeks and weeks, I'll use the spray. If not, I'd like to use the dust. All right, just buzzing through for some more questions. Let's see. Derek, I checked my pH with one of those two-pronged devices, and it says my pH is around 8. Is that too high? And could that be why my production is minimal? Yes. The pronged devices, I've done videos years and years and years ago trying to teach people how to use them, taught people how to use them, but in using them, I found that they're pretty much garbage unless you have a quality one. If your pH detector is right, 8 is too high, and that will impact how nutrients are pulled into your plant. Your plants can't access nutrients. That causes a problem. So if your soil is definitely an 8, that is going to be a production issue. You can do soil tests. You dig up a couple spaces throughout your garden, put it in a bag, you send it off to your local extension, and you can just look up soil tests in the state of Maryland, soil tests in Howard County. They're usually inexpensive or free. You can get a full testing of your soil. If your soil is an 8, mixing peat moss into the planting hole in the immediate area will bring down the pH. 8 is too alkaline. 7 is okay. I tend to say you want a soil pH between 6 and 7. And you can grow just about anything, even if it's a little below 6. But 8 is way up there. So that could definitely be the issue. Herbs and teas. Can you speak a bit about a transplant bed for fall crops? Soil, sun, water, transplant anything. This seems much simpler than starting seeds indoors. So I don't know if you saw my video, but I just talked about a transplant bed. So wherever you have space, and when you're right now is a great time to start transplants, direct seed for another round of summer crops for your fall crops. But if you start direct seeding all throughout your garden, you have to make sure you're hitting every seed with water. It can be a lot of work. Maybe you don't have space for your cabbages, for your brassicas, other brassicas. So what I'm doing is just in a row, not much longer than this, I'm putting in 1, 2, 3, 4 plantings of kale, and another one collards, another one cabbage, and it's all in a little space. I will let them grow. They will develop over the next weeks. I will dig them up, big root ball, and plant them where I want to put them in a garden. And that becomes a transplant bed. I only have to go to one place to manage a bunch of crops. I can put ag fabric over it. I can tend it much easier, and it really, really works. Let me just find the question again. Yeah, and you just want, so if you're doing warm weather crops, for instance, maybe cucumber plants or squash, you can do that and move the squash and cucumbers. I tend to put them, because it's summer, they're the main focus of my bed. I tend to put those seeds where I want them to be. If you are starting the cool weather crops, sometimes the sun, of summer beating down on the soil brings the soil temperatures up to 100 degrees, top couple of inches, 110 degrees, and that's not good. So you can just put shade cloth over it, and that will cool the soil, and you'll get better germination and better growth usually. But just keep an eye on things, and use the shade cloth as needed. I have beets, I have collards, I have kale, I have cabbage, I have carrots, some other things growing right now that are all for my fall garden. Scott, which AgroThrive do you prefer, or do you use both recipes? So they have one that is more nitrogen and a little bit less phosphorus and potassium, and then they have another one for blooming that has a little bit less nitrogen and more phosphorus and potassium. Personally, either one. Plants aren't that specific. I also just, so instead of using 4 ounces per gallon of AgroThrive, I use 3 ounces. Saves you a little money, and it goes further. So it is true that if you increase phosphorus and potassium, you can get more blooms and, maybe more fruit. But the amount that you need to increase the P and K in your soil really is a secret. I mean, if you have compost in there, you put down organic granular, you're feeding it with water soluble, the plant's really getting enough phosphorus and potassium. And the increase in harvest in flowers to me is really insignificant to require me to be now thinking about another fertilizer, spending money on another fertilizer, and then feeding that plant differently. You know, I just try and keep things simple. So either one works really well to answer your question. All right, got to find where I left off here on the questions. Brandon, hope you are well. Thank you. You have issues with earwigs. They are wreaking havoc on strawberries, tomatoes, corn silks, potato leaves. How would you solve this? So I always start with spinosad, dust. In this case, I feel like you need an insect dust. And this way the earwig crawls through it. It gets the dust on it. Hopefully it dies off. You could try the neem oil. You could try the sprays. I don't have a lot of experience with the earwigs, so they would have to ingest it. It's going to take a couple of days and kill them off. That could work, but I would start with Captain Jack's or anything that has spinosad, the dust, and I would sprinkle that on your leaves, let the earwigs walk through it and kill them. Any dust you use kills good and bad insects. Any spray you use will kill good and bad insects potentially. Organic, not organic, they're indiscriminate. So just use them in the best way possible. If that doesn't work, if neem oil won't work, if the spinosad doesn't work, then 7 dust will work. But that is not organic, and that's something you have to be comfortable with. So Jennifer, the dust can kill beehives. I can tell you that I've been using dust, organic, not organic at times, for 30 years. I have a thriving bee population and I'm not killing it out. The dust is not that potent, but it will kill the dust. The dust will kill bees that contact it, and it kills them pretty quickly, and the bees will die. As of wrecking all the hives, that's not necessarily true. If you're dusting near a hive and you're dusting where multiple and many bees get the dust and take it to their hive, that could be an issue. But I just want to be clear. And there's not necessarily safe natural things to keep bugs away. I wish there was. I've been looking for it for 40 years. You know, you want to be responsible. You want to grow maybe enough food that damage means you don't have to treat it. But if you get to the point of an infestation, it can be a problem. Some ways to use dust safely, more safely, is to put the dust down just as it's getting dark. When all the bees go away, you dust your plants. You have beetles that come out. You have earwigs that come out. They will run through it at night. You get out there first thing before the sun is up. Wash everything off, and that will protect bees and it will protect good insects. I've used the clay now for some insects, and it is effective. It's very similar to diatomaceous earth, and I'm still experimenting with it. So it is an option. It will put a coat of dust across everything, and it looks kind of odd, but it can be effective. I just haven't used it enough. And if you feel like it got rid of stink bugs, that is pretty impressive. And that really merits, I think, everybody trying that out. Stink bugs are really hard to kill. Michelle, which is better for powdery mildew? I use milk and a drop of peroxide on squash and tomatillos yesterday. Well, I don't know. Powdery mildew can be controlled by baking soda spray, which raises the pH, wettable sulfur spray, which lowers the pH of the leaf and really messes up fungus. Oil sprays can coat the fungi and cause a problem. Milk reacts with sunlight in some capacity. I forget how that can manage mildew. A drop of peroxide in there, I don't know if that will really make a difference. You need about 4 ounces in a gallon of water to make a difference. I use 4 ounces of hydrogen peroxide in a gallon of water. I spray my tomato plants with it. These are all organic too, by the way. And it really gets rid of leaf spot and early blight. And I would check the video out. I'm pretty sure memory serves me right. 4 ounces per gallon of water. You can even go up in it, but again, always test spray new sprays. But milk has been pretty effective. What fertilizer is best for melons? I don't have an opinion on fertilizers anymore. Like what's best? There's so many out there that are just a bunch of garbage and colorful writing and stuff. And I basically say any organic granular that is $2 or less, buy that. You can buy a bag of like 20-pound Espoma fertilizers for $17, 20 pounds for $17. I would spend money and get that big bag. I use that. In fact, I always tell the story, but I have probably still 20 bags of this 20-pound fertilizer. It's actually more. It might be 27-pound bags, actually. I got it for $5 a bag because in Maryland, when winter comes, everything goes on sale in January, and I just bought this huge pallet. So that's what I use. You don't need specialty tweaks in your fertilizers like we're being told. You don't need, like when you go to a store like Home Depot and you see lettuce fertilizer, tomato fertilizer, plant fertilizer, garden tone, pepper fertilizer, bulbing fertilizer, blooming fertilizer, berry fertilizer. You just don't need that. They're all so close together. If you put in a little bit too much, now you have more potassium and phosphorus. If you do a little bit less, now you have less phosphorus and potassium. Just give your plants when you can as much compost as you can make and give them any organic granular. And for a water soluble, fish emulsion works. I recommend AgroThrive. It's better balanced. It doesn't have the odor and my dog doesn't eat it. So I do like AgroThrive as a water soluble. If you had a perfect garden, I would just go with all the compost you can make, which is not possible for all of us, and a water-soluble fertilizer. I wouldn't even use the organic granulars. They're just not needed when you have compost. Water-soluble is great because it gives your plants that quick burst of N, P, and K in a water-soluble form they can use right away and gets them growing. All right, so we are at 11:32. I'll go for about another 13 minutes. And again, this is my Garden Grounds is my public live Q&A. I do every second and fourth Thursday, 11 a.m. I also have perk memberships. If you want to go to my YouTube channel, check it out. You can join. And I do a Q&A 4 or 5 times a month, just like this, except the group is smaller. And I stay on for an hour and answer everybody's questions. All right. Have you ever heard of mixing cold brew coffee, whole milk, and molasses together to pour over a bed to deter stink bugs? What do you think of this? It won't work. Coffee does not deter insects. It's kind of like this. Like I'm interested in the clay that I think it was you that mentioned that impacted the squash bug. And that makes sense. If they crawl through it, it gets into their joints. Maybe it dehydrates them. It does something. Milk will just break down. It'll be like a fertilizer. It'll add calcium. Molasses, the sugars will break down. You may see growth on the soil. It's going to get to the roots. Coffee, some people say the caffeine repels insects. It's not going to last. Anyway, that's all just going to be broken down by soil biology, maybe used a little bit by the plant, but it's not going to deter stink bugs. Trill, vacation week when container gardening. Is it best to bring the containers in for the week? I have 2 cherry tomato containers I'm worried about. So they do need watering. In one day, if they run out of water, they're going to be greatly damaged. So I do recommend trying to move your plants to a shady area. Inside, if it works, depending on how long you're going, you can buy the high-edged saucers and put them under your container, fill them with water, and it will suck, the plant will suck water up from there. You can't overwater them. That's one way to go, but it's really tough. Having people that can come and water is great. Sometimes they don't do the best job, but it is very, very difficult. All right, I need to find out where I left off here on the questions. A lot are coming in, that's good. And I will go for another 10 minutes here. Make sure you guys put question in front so I can find the questions. Caroline, some of my cherry tomato plant leaves are totally yellowing all the way up the plant. I have one plant do this and die, sprayed it with baking soda. So yellowing leaves isn't necessarily a fungus. Most times you see fungus on tomato plants, you're going to see a brown circle and it's concentric circles, circles within circles. And around the circle is a yellow halo. That means you have an active fungus. When the leaf just turns yellow, if there's no growth on the underside and you don't have anything on the top side, sometimes it's the heat that just beats it up. I would just try and water them, maybe mark down that variety, and maybe it's variety related to the heat. But if you don't see a specific fungal pattern on there and you don't see a mold under the leaf, it's probably due to the heat. What causes cucumber vines to not grow very fast? It's been about 6 weeks since I started a cucumber seed, and it's only 2 to 4 inches tall. It's in full sun. I mean, this would be the case. That's a lot of time. I would give it a big drink of fish emulsion or AgroThrive. The chemical fertilizers are safe. Don't use them 24/7. Don't use them only. But when you have plants that are stuck, the chemical fertilizers cover everything. Give them a quick drink. Go back to your organic ways. If you don't want to do that, then just stick with organic fertilizer. But give them a water-soluble now, a big fat drink. That will get them nitrogen, and that usually helps them take off. Surround might be effective, Patricia, for your eggplant. I haven't used it on there for flea beetles, but people say good things about it. Tina, how often do you use granular fertilizer and water-soluble fertilizer? Weekly or bi-weekly? So it's really a hard question to answer. I prep my beds usually at the end of the season and at the beginning of the season. And that may include, well, it does include lots of compost, mulches. Sometimes I sprinkle organic granular on the top in the fall, let it work its way in. When I plant, I'll put in a couple tablespoons of the organic granular because I have so much. You don't necessarily need it if you have a lot of compost, but compost, organic granular in the planting hole, water it in with the water soluble, and then for my in-ground plants, maybe once a month with the water soluble. I mean, I kind of just eyeball them. It's definitely not weekly. It's definitely not every 2 weeks. Containers, when the plants are small, maybe water soluble at planting, again in a month. But once the plant is up to size, the roots have filled out the container, you might have to give the water soluble fertilizer every week, every 2 weeks, depending on what you're growing. So it's a hard question to answer. Robert, I bought 2 packs of mortgage lifter tomato seeds from you yesterday. All I need to know is if you can save the seeds. 100%. They are heirlooms. So good luck with the mortgage lifter. I'm assuming you watched the video. Thank you for the seed shop support. Keep that plant watered well, and you should be good to go. And you definitely can save the seeds, and you will get the same plant over and over again. Julie, question, help with fighting spider mites on my tomatillo. So for spider mites, I have found it pretty effective to use peppermint oil. I sell that at my seed shop. If you get peppermint oil, you want 100% peppermint oil. You don't want like extracts. You want the oil. 1 to 2 teaspoons in a gallon of water with some soap so that the oil disperses through the water. And I spray really well the undersides and top sides of my cucumbers and beans. That's where I tend to get the spider mites. But there's no reason why it shouldn't work on tomatillos. I would give it a try. Your blueberry plants could be turning colors because it's really been hot or there's a lack of water. I would give them a big water, and there's no reason not to give them a little bit of water-soluble fertilizer. But you blueberries, if they're established, they're pretty hardy, and I don't bother too much with them right now. I'm in zone 7, 6, central PA. The bugs in my squash are pale white this year. They always have been brown in the past. Is there a different new bug? There were hundreds. Those are probably newly hatched squash bugs. So adult squash bugs are darker, they're a little bit bigger. They start as these little nymphs, they almost look like spiders, and then as they get bigger, they become kind of pale white, then gray, and then they turn to brown color. So you just probably have young squash bugs. I'm seeing those on my butternut squash. Tamika, you previously talked about trimming your asparagus. How do you go about that? My plants are getting unruly. I just hack them back. If your asparagus has been growing now, it's getting a lot of energy in, and I want to keep my hedge up, so anything that's sticking out from the hedge, I just go ahead and I cut back. And then if the top is really tall, you could take off a third. You're going to have enough green and leaves for the roots to recharge. So let's just wrap up real quick with neem oil. So neem oil, you want 100% cold pressed neem oil. You don't want the hydrophobic extract. It's 1 or 2 tablespoons in a gallon of water and enough soap so that when you shake it, the oil disperses for a good 20 or 30 seconds. Shake well between each spraying. The best routine, every 10 to 14 days on any brassica, really helps with the chewing worms and stuff like that. And that's what I predominantly use my neem oil spray for, is the brassicas. All right, we got to wrap up in a couple of minutes. I have a habanero plant that is super bushy, but not one flower. What would be the reason? The super hots sometimes grow like that. If you got it in a little bit late, they're just kind of getting bushy. They're waiting for the heat and everything's going to come at once. So, you just have to be patient. I'm in Central Florida. My tomatoes are almost all dropping flowers. They're 3 feet tall. Should I cut them down and start over? So tomatoes, sometimes peppers at the same temperature, but when it's in the 90s, upper 90s and hundreds, they're all going to stop production and they're going to slow down. Peppers do a little bit better. Sometimes in Florida where it's really hot, it's best not to grow July and August and grow like September into your winter or something like that. Assuming you don't get a frost, which I think is true for Florida. The other thing that you would do is you would want to use a shade cloth to cool the soil down, reduce the sun, probably a 70% shade cloth. If you remove them, you will have to start over and they're going to grow maybe into a cooler period, and that might be okay. But I would recommend probably thinking about using a shade cloth over them. Also, you can shade cloth them now, give them some water-soluble fertilizer. They're going to start taking off, and if the temperatures are right, they're going to start growing and producing flowers again. How do you overwinter strawberries in green stalks? So I'm in Maryland, zone 7. I always want to say that. I don't do anything. So they've been in these containers for almost 8 years now, and sometimes tomato or strawberries just die out naturally, but I keep replanting the runners. So they survive the winter here in Maryland, no issue. They do well. Sometimes I have, maybe 20% of the plants die. I don't know why, but I don't do anything. If you're in a colder area, you can kind of leave them out there till the real cold comes, and then just put them into a garage that has a little bit of protection, and then bring them back out, when it warms up. But, I don't do much. All right, so we're at actually 11:45. So I have So Grow as We Grow, which is GOG, which is a perk membership. That's just the acronym. I do a series where perk members can send me videos or questions. I have enough videos now for the Grow as We Grow, so I will be getting in touch with people about that. All right, I think we will wrap up there. Again, every second Thursday, fourth Thursday, 11 a.m., I do the Q&A, ask any question you want about vegetable gardening, and I usually have a light topic. All right, I will see you guys next time.